The warning lights on the control panel blinked red, and the officer on duty rubbed his eyes. He had been working for 12 hours straight at Border Station Theta 9, and his vision was getting blurry. The Korvathi Empire controlled this entire sector of space, and nothing ever happened here. Nothing exciting anyway. "Commander, we have something," the young technician said, pointing at his screen. The station commander walked over slowly. He was an old veteran with gray scales covering his reptilian face. His name was Velcros, and in 30 years of service he had never seen a real threat. The Empire was too powerful. Nobody dared to challenge them. "What is it?" Velcros asked. "A ship. A big one. It just crossed into our territory." Velcros looked at the reading and frowned. "Check your equipment. The sensors must be broken." "I already checked twice, sir. It's real." The commander stared at the screen. A massive vessel, 3 kilometers long, was moving through Imperial space. It traveled alone with no escort ships and no support fleet. Just one ship, moving steadily deeper into their territory. "Who would be stupid enough to come here alone?" Velcros muttered. He pressed a button on his console. "Send a patrol squadron. Tell them to intercept and identify the vessel." 12 Imperial warships launched from the nearby military station. They were fast attack cruisers, each one armed with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The squadron commander was a young officer eager to prove himself. His name was Thrace, and he had never been in real combat before. "Unknown vessel, this is Imperial Squadron 7, Thrace transmitted. "You have entered protected space. Identify yourself immediately." For a long moment there was only silence. Then a voice came through the communication system. It spoke perfect Korvathi, but there was something different about the accent. "This is Captain Jiho of the Terran Defense Force. We are passing through. Do not interfere." Thrace felt his blood run cold. Terran? Human? He had heard stories about humans. 50 years ago, the Empire had captured some human diplomats and sent them to the labor camps. The humans had seemed weak and primitive back then. Their ships were small and slow, but this ship was neither small nor slow. "Captain Jiho, you will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded," Thrace said, trying to sound confident. "If you refuse, we will open fire." "That would be a mistake," the human replied calmly. Thrace felt his pride wounded. How dare this human speak to him that way? He was an officer of the Korvathi Empire, the greatest military power in the sector. "This is your final warning!" The human ship continued forward without slowing down. It didn't even adjust its course. "All ships open fire," Thrace commanded. 12 warships unleashed their weapons. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, and energy beams all struck the human vessel at once. The firepower was enormous. It should have torn the ship apart. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ship's shields absorbed everything. The plasma dissipated like water on hot stone. The missiles exploded harmlessly against an invisible barrier. The energy beams scattered in all directions, hitting nothing. "Report," Thrace shouted. "No damage, sir. No damage at all." "Their shields are—" "I don't understand. Our weapons aren't even making them flicker." Thrace felt panic rising in his chest. "Fire again!" "Everything you have." The squadron fired for 3 full minutes. Every weapon, every system, every ounce of power they had. The human ship didn't slow down. It didn't return fire. It simply kept moving forward, passing through the squadron like they weren't even there. "Commander Velcros," Thrace transmitted back to the border station. His voice was shaking. "We have a problem. A big problem." Back at the station, Velcros watched the sensor readings in horror. His 30 years of experience told him something terrible. They had just encountered a ship that was completely immune to Imperial weapons. "Send an emergency message to High Command," Velcros ordered. "Priority 1. Tell them we have an unknown hostile vessel in our space. Tell them our weapons don't work against it. Tell them to send everything we have." The message traveled through the Empire's communication network at faster-than-light speed. Within hours, it reached the Imperial capital world of Korvathi's Prime. The Grand Palace sat at the center of the capital city, surrounded by monuments to 3,000 years of conquest and glory. Inside the palace, the War Council was meeting. Admiral Hyun sat at the head of the table. He was the supreme commander of all Imperial military forces. His face was scarred from a dozen battles and his eyes were hard and cold. "Show me," he commanded. A technician played the footage from Squadron 7's encounter. The council members watched in silence as Imperial weapons bounced harmlessly off the human ship. Some of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "This is not possible," one general said. No shield technology can absorb that much firepower. Clearly it can, Admiral Hyun replied quietly. He was thinking hard. Something about this situation felt familiar. Pull up our files on humans. Everything we have, the information appeared on the screen. 50 years ago, humanity had sent a diplomatic mission to the Empire. 20 humans had arrived in small, primitive ships. They had asked for peaceful relations and trade agreements. The Empire had laughed at them. Such a weak species had nothing to offer. Instead of negotiating, the Empire had taken the humans as slaves and sent them to the labor camps. It seemed like a reasonable decision at the time. Why waste time talking to primitives? Did we ever receive any response from Earth after that incident? Admiral Hyun asked. No, sir. They went completely silent. We assumed they were too afraid to challenge us. The Admiral stared at the frozen image of the human battleship on the screen. 50 years, he said slowly. 50 years of silence. What if they weren't afraid? What if they were building? The council chamber became very quiet. Sir, are you suggesting that in 50 years humanity developed technology superior to ours? Another general asked. That's impossible. We've been the dominant power for 3,000 years. Watch the footage again, Admiral Hyun said. Does that look impossible to you? Nobody answered. Where is this human ship heading? The Admiral asked. A technician brought up a navigation chart. Based on its current trajectory, sir, it's heading toward the Valcor system. Admiral Hyun felt his stomach tighten. Valcor was where the labor camps were located, where the human diplomats had been sent 50 years ago. They're coming for their people, he said quietly. One ship? A general scoffed. Even if it has good shields, one ship cannot threaten the Empire. Admiral Hyun stood up. That one ship just passed through a squadron without taking a single hit. It didn't even bother to return fire. He looked around the table. That's not weakness. That's confidence. They're showing us they could destroy our ships easily, but they're choosing not to. That's a message. Then what kind of message? The kind that says they're much more powerful than we thought. The Admiral walked to the window and looked out at the capital city below. Send orders to all fleets between here and Valcor. I want every available ship to intercept that human vessel, and tell them to be prepared for anything. How many ships, sir? Admiral Hyun turned back to face the council. His face was grim. All of them. Send the Grand Fleet. The Grand Fleet was the pride of the Empire. 5,000 warships ranging from small destroyers to massive dreadnoughts. It had never been fully deployed against a single target before. It had never needed to be. But as Admiral Hyun watched the footage one more time, seeing how easily the human ship had shrugged off their attacks, he knew they would need every ship they had. Somewhere in the darkness of space, the human battleship continued its steady journey toward Valcor. Captain Jiho sat in his command chair, watching the stars pass by. His crew worked quietly around him, professional and calm. Captain, we're receiving multiple tracking signals, his sensor officer reported. The Empire is mobilizing ships from all over the sector. Let them, Jiho replied. We're not here to fight. We're here to bring our people home. And if they try to stop us? Jiho looked at the view screen. Somewhere ahead in a labor camp on a distant world, 20 elderly humans were still waiting, still hoping. They had waited 50 years. They had survived 50 years of captivity because they believed humanity would come for them eventually. Then we'll show them why that would be a very bad idea, Jiho said quietly. But we'll give them every chance to step aside. We're not the Empire. We don't attack unless we have no other choice. The battleship moved on through the darkness, and behind it, the Korvathi Empire scrambled to respond to a threat they had created themselves 50 years ago. The Grand Fleet began assembling at the Nexus Point, a strategic location halfway between the border and the Valcor system. Ships arrived from every corner of the Empire, massive dreadnoughts that could level cities, swift destroyers designed to hunt down pirates, heavy cruisers bristling with weapons. They all gathered together, forming the largest fleet deployment in Imperial history. Admiral Hyun stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Through the viewport, he could see hundreds of ships already in position, with more arriving every hour. It was an impressive sight. Enough firepower to conquer entire star systems. Enough power to make any enemy surrender just by looking at it. But the Admiral felt no confidence. He kept thinking about the footage from the border patrol. One human ship completely untouched by Imperial weapons. What good were 5,000 ships if their weapons couldn't hurt the enemy? "Admiral, we have new intelligence," his aide said, handing him a datapad. Hyun read through the report. Imperial spies had been working overtime, trying to learn everything they could about humanity. What they found was disturbing. In the 50 years since the diplomatic incident, humanity had changed dramatically. They had built a ring of defensive stations around Earth, each one more powerful than anything the Empire possessed. They had developed new propulsion systems that made their ships twice as fast as Imperial vessels. And their weapons technology had leaped forward by centuries. "How is this possible?" Hyun muttered. 50 years. In 50 years, they went from primitive to superior. His aide hesitated before speaking. "Sir, some of our scientists have a theory. They think humanity might have had this technology all along. Those diplomatic ships 50 years ago might have been deliberately simple. Why would they do that? To test us. To see how we would treat a seemingly weaker species." Admiral Hyun felt sick. If that was true, then the Empire had failed the test spectacularly. They had taken peaceful diplomats and enslaved them, and now humanity was coming to collect the debt. "Sir, there's more," the aide continued. "Our cryptographers finally decoded some old transmissions from the human diplomatic mission. They found something you should read." Hyun took the datapad and read the message. It had been sent 50 years ago, just before the human diplomats entered Imperial space. "To whoever receives this message, we come in peace. We ask only for friendship and mutual respect. We believe all intelligent species deserve dignity and freedom. Remember this message should we meet again under different circumstances." The Admiral read it 3 times. "Remember this message should we meet again under different circumstances." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. The humans had given the Empire a chance to do the right thing. The Empire had chosen wrong. "How many of those human diplomats are still alive?" Hyun asked. "Unknown, sir. The labor camps don't keep detailed records of prisoners. Some might have died over the years. But if any survived, they're in the camps on Valcor." Hyun looked out at his assembled fleet. 5,000 ships, all because of 20 humans taken as slaves half a century ago. The cost of that arrogance was about to become clear. News of the human ship was spreading throughout the Empire despite efforts to keep it secret. Governors on border worlds started evacuating their populations. Some military officers quietly abandoned their posts and disappeared. The idea that the Empire might not be invincible was terrifying to people who had lived their entire lives believing in Imperial supremacy. On the Imperial homeworld, Emperor Minho called an emergency session with his closest advisors. Unlike his predecessors, Minho was young and pragmatic. He had inherited the throne only 5 years ago and was still learning how to rule. "Tell me honestly," the Emperor said to his council. "Can we defeat this human ship?" The council members looked at each other uncomfortably. Finally, the head military advisor spoke. "Based on what we've seen, no. Their defensive technology is far beyond ours, and if their shields are this advanced, we have to assume their weapons are equally sophisticated." "Then why haven't they used those weapons?" Minho asked. "They could have destroyed our border patrol easily, but they didn't fire a single shot. Perhaps they're weak in offense but strong in defense. Or perhaps," the Emperor said slowly, "they're showing restraint. They're telling us they could kill our people, but they're choosing not to. That's generous of them," one advisor said sarcastically. "Is it?" Minho stood and walked to the window. "We took their diplomats and made them slaves. They would be justified in wanting revenge. Instead, they send one ship on a rescue mission. One ship knowing we would respond with overwhelming force. That takes incredible confidence. Or incredible foolishness." The Emperor shook his head. "Admiral Hyun is our best military commander. He's assembling the entire Grand Fleet. If he thinks that's necessary, then the humans are not fools. They're dangerous." A message arrived from the border sectors. Another Imperial fleet had tried to intercept the human ship. 3 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought. The result was the same as before. The human ship passed through them without taking any damage. "How long until they reach Valcor?" the Emperor asked. 3 days, assuming they maintain current speed. "And how long until the Grand Fleet is in position?" Admiral Hyun reports they'll be ready in 2 days. The human ship will have to pass through the nexus point to reach Valcor. That's where the Admiral plans to intercept them. Emperor Minho was quiet for a long moment. He was thinking about history, about all the species the Empire had conquered over the centuries. Humanity was supposed to be just another weak civilization, easily dominated. But they weren't weak. They had been patient, What do we know about human psychology? Mino asked suddenly. His advisors looked confused. Sir, their psychology. How they think. What they value. An elderly advisor who specialized in alien cultures spoke up. From the old diplomatic records, we know they place enormous value on individual lives. Their entire mission 50 years ago was about peaceful coexistence and mutual respect. They talked constantly about dignity, freedom, and justice. So they're idealists? Perhaps. But their actions suggest those ideals are backed by serious power. They didn't respond immediately to our taking their diplomats. They waited. They built up their strength. And now they're coming. Not with an invasion fleet, but with one ship on a rescue mission. It's a very specific message. The Emperor understood. They're saying they can destroy us, but they'll settle for getting their people back. Essentially, yes. Then we should give them what they want. The council erupted in protest. We cannot show weakness, one general shouted. If we surrender to one human ship, every species in the galaxy will think the Empire is weak. The Empire is weak compared to humanity, Emperor Minho said quietly. That's now obvious. The question is whether we're smart enough to admit it. But the military advisors would not accept such thinking. They insisted the Grand Fleet could stop the human ship. They insisted Imperial honor demanded they fight. The Emperor, young and uncertain, eventually agreed to let Admiral Hyun try to stop the human vessel. Back at the Nexus Point, the Grand Fleet was almost fully assembled. Admiral Hyun walked through the corridors of his flagship, observing the crew. They were professional and well-trained, good soldiers, but he could see the fear in their eyes. Everyone had heard the stories by now. Everyone knew what they were up against. Sir, the human vessel will arrive in 18 hours, his tactical officer reported. Good. Make sure every ship is in position. I want a defensive wall 50,000 kilometers wide. Nothing gets through. Yes, sir. Hyun returned to his quarters and sat down heavily. He was an old warrior who had fought in dozens of battles. He had commanded fleets against pirates, rebels, and rival powers. He had always won, but this felt different. He wasn't fighting an enemy who wanted territory or resources. He was fighting an enemy who just wanted their people back. An enemy who had shown remarkable restraint despite having overwhelming power. The Admiral pulled up the old diplomatic message again and read it one more time. We come in peace. We ask only for friendship and mutual respect. The Empire had responded by enslaving them. Now humanity was responding with a single battleship that could apparently brush aside entire fleets. It was almost poetic. The Empire had shown the humans violence, and the humans had responded by becoming strong enough to destroy the Empire, but choosing not to. Yet, Hyun muttered, choosing not to yet. He knew what would happen at the Nexus Point. The Grand Fleet would try to stop the human ship, and the humans would demonstrate once again that Imperial power meant nothing against their technology. The only question was whether they would continue showing restraint, or whether the Empire would finally push them too far. Admiral Hyun opened a communication channel. This is Admiral Hyun to all fleet commanders. When the human vessel arrives, you will follow my orders exactly. No one fires unless I give the command. Is that understood? Acknowledgements came back from all ships. The Admiral hoped that discipline would hold. Because if some eager officer decided to play hero and fire without orders, things could go very badly very quickly. The hours ticked down slowly. The human battleship arrived at the Nexus Point exactly on schedule. Captain Jiho sat in his command chair, looking at the view screen. The sight before him was impressive. 5,000 Imperial warships arranged in a massive defensive formation. The wall of ships stretched across space, blocking the route to Valcor. Sensor analysis, Jiho requested calmly. Counting 5,047 vessels, sir, his sensor officer reported. Multiple ship classes. Estimate total firepower capacity at level 9 on the threat scale. Level 9, Jiho repeated quietly. Enough power to destroy everything on a planet's surface several times over. The Empire was showing their full strength. Should we alter course, sir? His navigation officer asked. No, maintain speed and heading. Bring us to a stop at 10,000 kilometers from their formation. The human ship moved forward steadily. On every Imperial vessel, alarms were sounding. Targeting systems locked onto the approaching battleship. Weapons charged to full power. Thousands of soldiers held their breath, waiting for the order to fire. Admiral Hyun watched from his flagship as the human vessel approached. It was beautiful in a way, All clean lines and purposeful design, so different from the blocky, aggressive look of Imperial ships. But he wasn't fooled by its appearance. That ship was a weapon, probably the most dangerous weapon he had ever encountered. "They're slowing, sir," his tactical officer reported, coming to a stop. The human battleship halted exactly 10,000 kilometers from the Imperial formation. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a communication request came through. "They're hailing us, sir." Admiral Hyun straightened his uniform. This was it, the moment that would determine whether thousands died today or whether reason would prevail. "Open the channel." The view screen changed, and Admiral Hyun found himself looking at a human face for the first time. Captain Jiho appeared young by Imperial standards, probably only in his 40s. He had dark hair and calm eyes that showed no fear despite facing 5,000 warships. "Admiral," Jiho said in perfect Korvathi, "thank you for taking my call." Hyun was surprised by the courtesy. "Captain Jiho, you're quite far from Earth." "Yes, we've come a long way for this." Jiho gestured to someone off-screen, and the view expanded to show the bridge of the human ship. It was clean and efficient, with a crew working at their stations with quiet professionalism. "You must know you're facing the grand fleet of the Korvathi Empire," Hyun said. "The largest military force ever assembled against a single target." "I'm aware." Jiho's expression didn't change. "I'm honored in a way, though I wish the circumstances were different." Then turned back. "There's no need for conflict here." Jiho shook his head slowly. "Admiral, we both know I can't do that. 50 years ago, your empire took 20 of our people. We're here to bring them home. Those humans entered our territory illegally. They were processed according to Imperial law. They were diplomats on a peaceful mission, and you enslaved them." Jiho's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Let's not pretend this is about law. This is about power. Your empire thought we were weak, so you took what you wanted." Admiral Hyun felt his face grow hot. The human was right, of course, but admitting it would mean admitting the empire was wrong. Those humans are Imperial property now. They've been in the labor system for decades. They're probably not even alive anymore. Then we'll recover their bodies and give them proper burials. Jiho leaned forward slightly. "Admiral, we have no quarrel with your people. We don't want to conquer your worlds or destroy your ships. We just want our citizens back. That's all we've ever wanted. And if I refuse? If I tell you that the might of the Empire stands between you and Valcor?" Jiho was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that made Admiral Hyun's blood run cold. "Then I'll be very disappointed in you, Admiral. I've read your service record. You're a good officer, smart, experienced. You've seen the reports from the border encounters. You know what will happen if this turns into a fight. Your shields are impressive," Hyun admitted. "But shields can be overwhelmed with enough firepower. And I have a lot of firepower." "You do," Jiho agreed. "You absolutely do. But Admiral, we didn't come here to test our shields. We came for our people. You have a choice right now. You can move your fleet aside and let us pass peacefully. Or you can try to stop us and learn exactly how far humanity has come in the last 50 years. That sounds like a threat. It's a statement of fact." Jiho's voice remained level. "I'm giving you 10 minutes to make your decision. Move aside or stay and face the consequences. The choice is yours." The communication ended. Admiral Hyun stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his officers. "Opinions?" "He's bluffing," one commander said immediately. "One ship can't defeat 5,000. His shields are good, but we can overwhelm them with concentrated fire," another agreed. But the Admiral's tactical officer, a veteran named Kresh, spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, I've been analyzing their ship's energy readings. The power output from their reactor it's beyond anything I've ever seen. If their weapons match their shields, they could potentially destroy every ship here before we could return effective fire." "You're saying we should just let them through?" a commander asked angrily. "I'm saying we should consider the possibility that the captain isn't bluffing." Admiral Hyun looked at the chronometer. 8 minutes remaining. He thought about his crew, about the thousands of lives under his command. He thought about the Empire's pride and history. And he thought about those 20 humans in the labor camps who had done nothing wrong except try to make peace. "Sir, 6 minutes remaining. What are your orders?" The Admiral took a deep breath. He had made his decision. "We hold position. When the time expires, if they attempt to pass through our formation, all ships will open fire. Concentrated targeting on their forward shields. Maybe we can punch through with enough hits. He saw Kresh's face fall slightly, but the tactical officer said nothing. The minutes ticked away slowly. At exactly 10 minutes, the human ship's systems changed. New energy signatures bloomed across their sensors. They're powering up something, Kresh reported. I can't identify the system. It's not weapons, not engines. Something else. Admiral Hyun gripped his command chair. All ships, prepare to fire on my mark. But before he could give the order, everything changed. A pulse of energy erupted from the human battleship. It wasn't a weapon blast. It was more like a wave, washing over the entire Imperial fleet in an instant. And then across 5,000 ships, the same thing happened. Systems died, engines shut down. Weapons went offline. Tactical displays went dark. Life support stuttered for a terrifying moment before emergency backups kicked in. In the span of 3 seconds, the entire Grand Fleet was rendered completely helpless. Emergency lighting flickered on across the Eternal Dominion's bridge. Admiral Hyun stared at his dead control panels in disbelief. Report, what happened? I don't know, sir. Kresh was frantically trying to restart his systems. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse, but more sophisticated. It specifically targeted our primary systems while leaving life support intact. The communication system still worked, running on backup power. Captain Jiho's face appeared on the view screen again. He looked almost apologetic. Admiral Hyun, I'm sorry it came to this, Jiho said. That was a directed electromagnetic neutralization field. Your ships are completely unharmed. Your crews are safe, but your primary systems are offline and will remain so until we pass. Admiral Hyun found his voice. You disabled 5,000 ships in seconds? Yes, and Admiral, I want you to understand something important. That wasn't a weapon. That was a demonstration. If we wanted to destroy your fleet, we could have. Our actual weapons are far more destructive. But we don't want to kill you. We never did. The Admiral slumped in his chair. Around him, his bridge crew sat in stunned silence. They had just witnessed the impossible. An entire Grand Fleet, the pride of the Empire, neutralized without a single shot fired. You could have destroyed us, Hyun said quietly. Yes. Why didn't you? Jiho's expression softened slightly. Because unlike your empire, we don't destroy people just because we can. We value life, Admiral. Even the lives of those who wronged us. We came here for 20 of our people. We're not interested in killing thousands of yours. How long until our systems come back online? Approximately 4 hours after we're out of range. Long enough for us to reach Valcor and complete our mission. Long enough that you can't follow us or warn the camp. Jiho paused. Admiral, when your systems restart, you'll find we've left a complete technical analysis of what we did. Study it, learn from it. Maybe it will help your scientists understand how far behind you really are. Why would you give us that information? Because we don't want to be your enemy, Admiral. We want the Empire to understand that the old ways need to change. You can't bully weaker species anymore. You can't take people as slaves. The galaxy is changing and you need to change with it. Admiral Hyun felt like he was seeing clearly for the first time in his life. The Empire's strength was an illusion. They had been the most powerful force in the sector only because they hadn't met anyone stronger. Now they had, and the difference was staggering. Our people on Valcor, Hyun said slowly. The camp personnel. Will you harm them? The labor camp on Valcor looked like a wound on the planet's surface. Gray buildings sprawled across the barren landscape, surrounded by high walls and guard towers. Thousands of prisoners worked in the mining operations, extracting valuable minerals from deep beneath the ground. The work was hard, the conditions were harsh, and hope was something most prisoners had forgotten long ago. In the oldest section of the camp, in a small barracks building, 20 elderly humans gathered for their daily meal. They moved slowly, their bodies worn down by decades of hard labor. But their eyes were still sharp, still aware. They had survived 50 years in this place by staying strong together. The eldest was a man named Taeyang. He had been 35 years old when the diplomatic mission arrived at the Empire's borders. Now he was 85, his hair completely white, his face lined with age. But he remembered everything about that mission. The hope they had felt. The belief that they could forge peaceful relations with a powerful alien empire. The shock when instead of negotiations, they had been shackled and thrown into ships bound for the labor camps. You're quiet today, said a woman sitting next to him. Her name was Bora, and she had been one of the junior diplomats on the mission. I was just thinking, Taeyang replied. 50 years today? 50 years since we arrived here. Don't think about it.
Just makes you sad. I'm not sad.
I'm angry. Taeyang looked around at his fellow survivors. 20 had come to this camp originally. Through disease, accidents, and the harsh conditions, they had lost none. It was a miracle, really. They had kept each other alive through sheer determination. "Sir," one of the younger humans said. He was 60 now, but they still called him young. "Do you think Earth even knows we're alive?" Taeyang smiled. "I know they do. Somewhere someone is looking for us. Humanity doesn't abandon its people. We just have to wait." It was something he had said many times over the years. A mantra, a hope. Some days it was hard to believe. But Taeyang had to believe it. Without that belief, what was the point of surviving? Suddenly, alarms began blaring across the camp. The prisoners looked up in confusion. The alarm system was rarely used. It meant something serious was happening. "All personnel to defensive positions," a voice shouted over the camp speakers. "Hostile vessel in orbit! This is not a drill." The humans looked at each other. A hostile vessel? Who would attack the Empire's labor camps? Commander Doyen ran to the command center, his heart's pounding. He was the camp commander, responsible for thousands of prisoners and hundreds of guards. The labor camp was supposed to be safe, far from any conflict zones. What could possibly be threatening them? "Report," he shouted as he entered the command center. "Sir, a large vessel just appeared in orbit. It's not broadcasting any Imperial identification codes. We tried to hail them, but they're not responding." "What kind of vessel?" "Unknown design, sir. 3 kilometers long. Heavy shields detected." "Wait, they're launching something." "A single shuttle." Doyen felt ice in his stomach. He had received warning messages about a human ship that had defeated the border patrol and somehow passed through the Grand Fleet. But he had dismissed them as exaggerations. Rumors. Now, looking at the sensor readings, he realized the warnings had been real. "The shuttle is heading for the main compound," the sensor operator said. "Landing in 2 minutes. All guards to the landing area. Weapons ready." Doyen grabbed his communication device. "I want a full security team at the landing zone. Whatever comes off that shuttle, we stop it." But even as he gave the orders, Doyen felt a sick certainty. If this was the same ship that had passed through the Grand Fleet, what could a few dozen camp guards do against it? The shuttle landed in the center of the compound, settling gently onto the hard-packed earth. For a long moment, nothing happened. Guards surrounded the vessel, weapons aimed at the hatch. Prisoners watched from behind the barracks buildings, curious despite their fear. Then the hatch opened, and 7 figures emerged. Humans. 7 humans in dark uniforms walking calmly down the shuttle's ramp. The lead human was clearly the commander. He had captain's insignia on his collar and moved with quiet confidence. "Stop right there," a guard commander shouted. "You're in a restricted Imperial facility." "Leave immediately or we will fire." Captain Jiho stopped walking. He looked around at the dozens of guards pointing weapons at him, and he smiled slightly. "I'm Captain Jiho of the Terran Defense Force. We're here to retrieve our citizens." "Step aside. You have no authority here." Jiho turned his gaze to the guard commander. The look in his eyes made the guard take an involuntary step backward. "I have the authority of every human who has been wronged by your empire. Now step aside or I'll move you aside." Commander Doyen arrived, pushing through the crowd of guards. "I am Commander Doyen, in charge of this facility. Captain, I understand you're looking for humans who were sent here long ago. Perhaps we can negotiate their release." "There's nothing to negotiate," Jiho said flatly. "We're taking them. The only question is whether you try to stop us. I have orders to protect this facility. Then I suggest you get new orders." Jiho gestured to his team, and they began walking toward the prisoner barracks. Guards moved to block their path but hesitated when the humans simply kept walking, apparently unconcerned about the weapons pointed at them. "Fire a warning shot," Doyen ordered desperately. A guard fired his weapon into the ground in front of the humans. They didn't even slow down. "Sir, should we fire on them directly?" the guard commander asked quietly. Doyen looked at the human captain's face and saw absolutely no fear. He thought about the reports he had received about this ship, how it had brushed aside entire fleets, how it had disabled the Grand Fleet in seconds, and he realized that if they fired on these humans, the response would be swift and final. "No," Doyen said quietly. "Let them through." The guards lowered their weapons, confused but obedient. Captain Jiho nodded to Commander Doyen as he passed. A wise decision. In their barracks, the 20 elderly humans heard the commotion outside. They heard unfamiliar voices speaking in a language they hadn't heard in 50 years. A language they had almost forgotten. Korean Taeyang felt his heart start racing. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. The barracks door opened. A human in a military uniform stood there, and behind him, more humans in the same uniforms. The lead human looked at them with tears in his eyes. "Ambassador Taeyang?" Captain Jiho asked softly. Taeyang stood up slowly, his old legs shaking. "Yes, I'm Ambassador Taeyang." "Sir, I'm Captain Jiho. We've come to bring you home." For a long moment, Taeyang just stared. Then tears began streaming down his face. Around him, his fellow survivors were crying too. 50 years. 50 years of waiting, of hoping, of surviving. And finally, someone had come. "We knew," Taeyang said, his voice breaking. "We knew someone would come. We just had to wait long enough." Jiho walked forward and offered his hand. Taeyang took it, feeling the strength in the younger man's grip. "I'm sorry it took so long, sir. You're here now. That's all that matters." As the rescue team began leading the elderly humans out of the barracks, something unexpected happened. Other prisoners began emerging from their buildings. Aliens of a dozen different species, all of them slaves like the humans had been. "Captain," one of Jiho's team members said, "there are hundreds more prisoners here. Maybe thousands." Jiho looked around at the faces watching him. Some were hopeful, some were afraid. All of them were trapped in the same system that had held his people for 50 years. "Captain, our orders were to retrieve our citizens only," another team member reminded him. Jiho was quiet for a moment. Then he opened a communication channel that broadcast throughout the entire camp. His voice echoed from every speaker. "Attention all prisoners. My name is Captain Jiho. I'm here from Earth to rescue captured humans, but I see that you're all prisoners of the same system. Anyone who wants to leave this place, follow us. The Empire's hold on this camp ends today." Commander Doyen heard the announcement and felt panic rising. "You can't do this. These are Imperial prisoners. You're starting a war. Your empire started this war 50 years ago when you took peaceful diplomats as slaves." Jiho replied coldly. "We're just finishing it." Hundreds of prisoners began moving toward the shuttle. Aliens who had given up hope years ago suddenly saw a chance at freedom. The guards watched helplessly as their authority crumbled. "We can't fit everyone in one shuttle," a team member told Jiho. "Then we'll make multiple trips. The battleship has plenty of room." For the next 3 hours, the shuttle made trip after trip, carrying prisoners from the camp to the waiting battleship in orbit. The elderly humans went first, treated with gentle care by the rescue team. Then came the others, species that the Empire had conquered and enslaved. Commander Doyen watched the exodus with growing horror. His camp was emptying. His prisoners were leaving, and there was nothing he could do about it. His guards were too afraid to act, and honestly, he was too afraid to order them to. When the last shuttle load departed, Captain Jiho stood alone in the camp compound. Commander Doyen approached him carefully. "You've destroyed this facility," Doyen said. "The Empire will respond. Let them respond." Jiho looked at the camp, at the empty barracks and silent work areas. "This place is a monument to cruelty." Emperor Minho sat alone in his private chambers, watching the recordings for the 100th time. The border encounter where Imperial weapons bounced harmlessly off human shields. The Grand Fleet disabled in seconds without a single shot fired. The liberation of Valkyr Camp and the message Captain Jiho had broadcast to the entire Empire. "This is not justice. This is tyranny. And it ends now." The words echoed in the young Emperor's mind. He had inherited a 3,000-year-old empire built on conquest and slavery. He had been taught since childhood that the Korvathi were superior. That might made right. That the strong ruled the weak. It was the way things had always been. But watching these recordings, Minho saw clearly what that philosophy had created. An empire so convinced of its own strength that it couldn't recognize when it encountered something stronger. An empire that had enslaved peaceful diplomats and expected no consequences. An empire that was now paying the price for its arrogance. His door opened and his advisors entered. They looked tired and frightened. The entire government was in chaos. News of Valkor had spread despite attempts to suppress it. Across the empire, labor camps were experiencing revolts. Slave populations were rising up, demanding freedom. Some provincial governors were already negotiating with their prisoners rather than risk human intervention. "Your Majesty," the head advisor said, "the military council is demanding action. They want to mobilize forces to hunt down the human vessel." "To what end?" Minho asked quietly. So we can lose another fleet? So we can prove once again that we're outmatched? We cannot simply accept this humiliation. The Emperor stood and walked to the window. Below, the capital city stretched out in all directions. Billions of Korvathi lived there, believing in the Empire's strength and protection. What would happen when they learned the truth? Send a message to Earth, Minho said suddenly. I want to speak directly with their leadership. Your Majesty, we cannot show weakness by initiating contact. We've already shown weakness by losing every encounter. Minho turned to face his council. Listen to me carefully.
Humanity has demonstrated power far beyond ours.
They could have destroyed our fleets. They could have bombarded our worlds. They didn't. They showed restraint. That tells me they don't want war. They want justice. Justice? One advisor scoffed. They invaded our territory and stole our property. They rescued their citizens from slavery. Minho's voice rose. Citizens we had no right to take in the first place. We violated their trust and now we're paying for it. The only question is whether we're smart enough to limit the damage or foolish enough to make it worse. The room fell silent. The Emperor's words carried weight not just because of his position, but because everyone present knew he was right. What do you propose, Your Majesty? The head advisor asked quietly. I propose we do something no emperor has done in 3,000 years. I propose we apologize. The message from the Empire arrived at Earth 3 days later. It was addressed directly to the Terran Council, the governing body of humanity. The message was shocking in its humility. Emperor Minho personally acknowledged the wrong done to the human diplomats 50 years ago. He offered formal apologies and reparations. He proposed a treaty between humanity and the Empire, recognizing each other as equals. The Terran Council debated for 2 days. Some members wanted to reject the offer and demand more. Some wanted to use this moment of weakness to extract territorial concessions. But in the end, wisdom prevailed. The response came from Ambassador Hana, a woman in her 40s with her father's steady gaze and diplomatic skill. Her father was Ambassador Taeyang, the man who had survived 50 years in the labor camps. She had been only 10 years old when he left on his mission. Now she was 50 and he was finally coming home. Emperor Minho, Hana said in the recorded message, on behalf of humanity, we acknowledge your apology. We recognize that you inherited this situation rather than created it. We appreciate your willingness to make things right. However, apologies alone are not enough. Actions must follow words. She outlined humanity's demands. The immediate abolition of the labor camp system throughout the Empire, full reparations for all freed prisoners, the establishment of protected trade routes through Imperial space, and most importantly, the signing of a comprehensive treaty that would recognize the rights and dignity of all intelligent species. These terms are not negotiable, Hana stated clearly, but they are also not meant as punishment. They are meant as the foundation for a better future. Humanity does not seek to destroy the Empire. We seek to transform it, meet these terms, and we can move forward as partners rather than enemies. When Emperor Minho received the response, he read through the demands carefully. They were harsh but fair. Everything humanity asked for was just. The question was whether the Empire had the courage to accept such fundamental change. He called another council meeting. This time he was prepared for resistance. They demand we abolish the entire labor system, one general said, predictably outraged. Our economy depends on that system. It would cause chaos. Then our economy is built on an immoral foundation, Minho replied. And yes, there will be chaos. Change is never easy. But the alternative is worse. What alternative? Continued conflict with a civilization that can defeat us effortlessly. Revolt spreading across every world we control. The slow collapse of the Empire as species after species breaks free. We can manage an orderly transition now, or we can watch everything fall apart later. Those are our choices. Admiral Hyun, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Your Majesty, I faced the humans at the nexus point. I commanded 5,000 ships and they disabled us in seconds. Not destroyed. Disabled. They could have killed every person in that fleet, but they chose not to. That kind of power combined with that kind of restraint is rare. Perhaps we should take the lesson they're offering. You support accepting their terms? Another admiral asked in surprise. I support survival and adaptation, Hyun replied. I've spent my entire life believing the Empire was invincible. I was wrong. We all were. It's time to accept reality and find a new path forward. Slowly, painfully, the council came to a consensus. The Empire would accept humanity's terms. The formal treaty was signed 6 months later. It took place on a neutral station at the border between human and Imperial space. Emperor Minho and Ambassador Hana met in person for the first time. Behind them, Captain Jiho stood at attention in his dress uniform, and beside him, moving slowly but proudly, was Ambassador Tai Yang. "Ambassador," Emperor Minho said, approaching the elderly human, "I cannot undo what was done to you. I cannot give you back the 50 years that were stolen. But I can promise you that your suffering will not be meaningless. The changes beginning today are because of your strength and survival." Tai Yang looked at the Emperor for a long moment. Then he offered his hand. "I accept your apology, Your Majesty. Not because what happened was acceptable. It never will be. But because I believe you when you say things will change." The treaty was signed by both parties. Its terms were broadcast across both civilizations. The labor camps would close within 1 year. Reparations would be paid. New laws protecting the rights of all species would be enacted. Not everyone was happy. There were protests on Imperial worlds. Some military officers resigned rather than serve under the new order. Some planets on the Empire's borders declared independence, and the Empire let them go without a fight. The transformation was painful and messy, but it was also necessary. Captain Jiho returned to Earth as a hero. Parades celebrated his success. Politicians gave speeches about humanity's strength and courage. But in quiet moments, Jiho thought about all the lives that hung in the balance during his mission. Every decision he made could have led to war and death. He had been careful, measured, showing force without using it destructively. It had worked, but it could so easily have gone wrong. "Do you regret anything?" Admiral Hyun asked him. They had developed a strange friendship after the Nexus Point encounter, communicating regularly as the treaty was negotiated. "I regret that it took 50 years, Jiho replied. "I regret that 20 people had to suffer because the Empire made a terrible choice. But I don't regret how we handled the rescue. We could have destroyed your fleet. We could have bombarded your worlds. We chose not to. I think that choice defined who we are. It impressed many in the Empire, including me. Good, because humanity isn't going anywhere. We're part of the galactic community now, whether others like it or not. Better to be partners than enemies." Ambassador Tai Yang lived for 2 more years after returning to Earth. He spent that time with his daughter Hana and his grandchildren, whom he had never met. He gave interviews about his experience, always emphasizing that he harbored no hatred for the Korvati people, only for the system that had enslaved him. When he died peacefully in his sleep, both human and Korvathi leaders attended his funeral. Emperor Minho gave a speech calling Tai Yang a bridge between civilizations, a symbol of survival and hope. 5 years after the treaty, the changes in the Empire were becoming permanent.